Creating super powerful icon ability builds is a lot of fun in Final Fantasy XVI. Just before heading into the final missions, you'll have access to 7 iconic feats and 30 abilities, so there's a ton of possible combinations. But even though you can reassign ability points at any time, you almost definitely won't have enough to be able to mix and match whatever you want by the end of the game. So let's check out what I've found to be the 3 best bang for your buck endgame builds you can actually put together before finishing the game. Mixing and matching abilities like this is crucial for creating the best builds, but of course, mastering is quite expensive, especially for the most powerful abilities. If you want to check out the exact costs for each, I put together this spreadsheet that I'll link down below. But unless you do a ton of side content and farm a lot of basic enemies, you won't have enough points to mix and match whatever you want until finishing the game and getting well into New Game Plus. While it can be tempting to use a certain icon to get access to a particular ability you want, this is not optimal if you don't make use of their feat, since the diamond-shaped feats are always tied to their icon. So generally, to create an optimized build, we want to first choose our feats and then figure out which abilities we'd like to add. Garuda's Deadly Embrace might be the most useful feat in the game. The ability to grab small enemies both on the ground and out of the air is very nice and will be especially useful if you plan to do New Game Plus, since you'll need to deal with lots of small enemies again. The Deadly Takedown variation is also excellent, allowing you to topple large enemies when their will bar reaches 50%. I also really like Deadly Embrace because you can easily get and keep yourself airborne, either to set up for an aerial combo or to avoid large attacks that can be difficult to dodge on the ground. You can use Deadly Embrace 4 times in a row to climb higher into the air, but even after that, you can still get a couple more in to extend your airtime. Other good iconic feats for the endgame include Titan's Titanic Block, Odin's Arm of Darkness, Bahamut's Wings of Light, and Shiva's Cold Snap. There's also a few key abilities that you'll want to consider for almost any build. Judgment Bolt and Giga Flare are great for dealing massive attack damage. Wind Up is also good for this, but not quite as strong. Gouge, Raging Fists, Impulse, and Diamond Dust are all good for applying stagger damage, with Diamond Dust being phenomenal as both the strongest and the fastest. We also have what I would call utility abilities, namely Will-o'-the-Wikes and Lightning Rod, which offer some benefits on their own, but really shine when used to enhance other abilities. Okay, so let's take Garuda, Titan, and Shiva to put together my current favorite endgame build. On Garuda, I use Will-o'-the-Wikes and Lightning Rod, both of which are relatively cheap to master. Will-o'-the-Wikes offers some passive protection, absorbing damage from up to 4 attacks, and even though its stagger rating is relatively low, the damage rate and total number of hits allow it to deal a decent amount of passive stagger damage if you can stay close to the enemy. Lightning Rod basically acts as a damage multiplier. For example, it will boost our Will-o'-the-Wikes stagger damage if kept near us and the enemy, but it will also boost other attacks, and it causes enemies to damage themselves if they hit it, boosting their attack damage even more than ours. This is great for mixing into combos and larger bosses, but the AoE of the lightning is also good for crowd control against groups of smaller enemies. Keep in mind you can move the lightning rod around the battlefield after initially placing it by hitting whichever button you've mapped to it again. And also remember you can use taunt to lure enemies into the lightning rod. On Titan, I use Raging Fists and Wind Up. Wind Up is great for hitting a large amount of damage in one quick shot. To use it optimally, you want to hold down the ability button and release when the gauge is in the red precision execution zone to maximize damage. Upgrading only extends the size of the red zone, so you'll have to be a little quicker to nail it, but I think that's well worth leaving it at the base level and saving 660 points. Raging Fist is pretty good for damage too, but I actually use it primarily for applying stagger damage. It's only rank 3 for stagger, but it executes a lot of hits really fast, so it can knock down the will bar really quickly, especially if you time the first hit to block an incoming attack to get a damage boost. Definitely remember to spam the ability button to get more hits too. Finally, on Shiva, the first ability is Diamond Dust, which is the best way to boost the stagger damage multiplier to the max 1.5 almost instantly. In my key tips video, I was actually mistaken when I said the stagger multiplier builds up based on the number of hits. It's actually based on how much stagger damage an attack does. So even though Diamond Dust doesn't do very many hits, it does a ton of stagger damage and gets that multiplier maxed out fast. The second ability on Shiva is Bahamut's Giga Flare, which just does an insane amount of damage. Okay, so here's the combo rotation I typically do on larger enemies. I'll start off by setting out a Lightning Rod and popping Will-o'-the-Wikes. Then I'll use Raging Fist to deal some damage and get the stagger bar knocked down, ideally hitting the enemy near the Lightning Rod for a boost, but either way, Will-o'-the-Wikes will deal some additional stagger damage as we go. For a really tough boss, I'll also use Wind Up and maybe even Diamond Dust early if I think think they'll be recharged by the time I get the enemies staggered. Once they're about to go down, I make sure to get a fresh lightning rod out and trigger Will-o'-the-Wisps again if it's recharged. Immediately after they go down, we pop Diamond Dust to instantly max the damage multiplier. Next, we trigger Limit Break and use Giga Flare. The QuickTime events for Diamond Dust, Limit Break, and Giga Flare all pause the will bar recharge. So once Giga Flare's done, we have plenty of time to follow up with Wind Up and Raging Fist if it's recharged. If you do this properly, there will probably still be a little time left on the stagger, so you can just get in a Burning Blade and Charged Magic combo to finish it off. With this build and rotation, I can easily get 80 or 90,000 damage. Now, that's certainly not as good as the 200k plus you can do with more expensive builds, but it's solid damage, and I really like the flexibility these feats and abilities offer for taking on both bosses and regular enemies. I have a lot of mobility with Shiva and Garuda, and also the ability to block with Titan. Shiva also lets me freeze enemies, which I like for controlling the pace. And if you don't have enough points to master Giga Flare, it costs about 1,000 points less to master Judgment Bolt instead, which still does some very good damage. Now, I realize a lot of players probably won't like using Shiva, so an easy modification you can make to this build that also saves you 750 points is to swap Shiva for Bahamut and master Diamond Dust instead of Giga Flare. If you go for this build, I would also recommend mastering Wings of Light so you can get the level 4 Mega Flare. Another build I like pairs Bahamut with Titan and Odin. Our Titan abilities will be the same as before, Raging Fists and Wind Up, and we'll still want Diamond Dust to get the stagger multiplier up fast, but this time we'll master it to use with Odin. We want Odin for the Arms of Darkness feat, which gives us access to the insanely powerful Zantetsuken. This is a bit like Limit Break, but specific to Odin's abilities. Hit your feat button and Clive's blade will get replaced with Odin's, which deals less damage but builds up the charge on the Zantetsuken gauge. If you're going for this build, you definitely want to master Arms of Darkness so you can max out the Zant at level 5. You also probably want an upgraded Dancing Steel, as that's the best way to charge up Zant quickly. On Bahamut, we'll of course upgrade Giga Flare, and I recommend using Impulse as well. If you can afford this build, you probably won't have many points left, so you'll likely have to leave Wings of Light and Impulse at their base levels. But being able to use Zantetsuken is worth it if you like the mechanic. To use this build, you want to make sure you've built up Zant to level 5 before an enemy gets staggered. The charge will persist even if you switch to other abilities. Dancing Blades will charge it fastest, but doing lunges and other basic ability attacks will also help. Once you get an enemy staggered, use Diamond Dust to max the stagger multiplier. Then trigger Limit Break and unleash the Zant. Now disengage Limit Break and follow up with Dancing Steel to recharge Zant immediately. Then go back into Limit Break and unleash a second Zant. Finally, finish off with Giga Flare for some ridiculous damage. If you don't quite have the points to do this one, or if you don't like the slow wind up on Dancing Steel, which can definitely be annoying with groups of enemies, then you can swap it out for Gungnir instead, but it won't pause the will bar recharge like Dancing Steel, so you probably can't get a second Zant in during a stagger. Another variation I've been experimenting with drops Titan so we can get access to Garuda again. It depends on exactly how many points you have, but for this build I also downgraded Dancing Steel to the base level so I could upgrade Deadly Embrace and Gouge and master Lightning Rod, which I put on Garuda. The extra damage from Lightning Rod when using Giga Flare and Zant is worth it in my opinion. Reallocating points like this also allows me to master Wings of Light for a stronger Mega Flare. This build does get a little expensive though, so let's finish with my least expensive build that combines Garuda, Titan, and Bahamut. Like on the last one, on Garuda we'll use an upgraded Gouge and Lightning Rod. On Bahamut we'll of course have Giga Flare upgraded, and we'll also equip a mastered Diamond Dust. And on Titan we have Raging Fists and Wind Up once again. This build is a great all-arounder, offering solid attack and stagger damage, the ability to block with Titan, and all the benefits of Garuda's Deadly Embrace. For 750 more points, I would personally swap Bahamut for Shiva and put Giga Flare there, but that's just because I like the mobility of Shiva. If you find Lightning Rod hard to use, then for just 55 more points, you could swap it out for Will-o'-the-Wisps, which offers some extra protection. Oh, and by the way, if you need to farm some extra ability points, just run around taking out groups of weaker enemies in an area like the marshes around Martha's Rest. Blue Chocobos are a great source for points as they give a bit more than other enemies. If you're past the point where you can farm them, then this Hyena pack in the Crichton Hollow area east of the Ravenwit Walls obelisk is a good source too. Just kill all 6 and fast travel back to the obelisk to force them to respawn. Also, be sure to pick up the Wages of Warcraft accessory from the Patron's Whisper in the Hideaway as early as you can, as it will give you an extra 20% ability points from normal encounters. Alright guys, those are the 3 icon builds I think are the best bang for your buck heading into the endgame and New Game Plus. What's really cool about Final Fantasy XVI is just how many viable builds there are, so definitely let me know what you're liking in a comment down below. Thanks to my friends Wizzy the Dizzy and That's for the Birds over on Discord for giving me some ideas for these builds. Now, if you're earlier in the game or want to make sure you understand the more fundamental mechanics, I'd highly recommend checking out my key combat tips video right here. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.